Halo 3 flighting has been ongoing for a little while now, and it's been pretty smooth. Minus some lighting and music glitches, the port is shaping up to be quite solid, which is a welcome change of pace after combat evolved in Halo 2, which were less than stellar. Halo 3 is one of my favorite games, and definitely my favorite Halo game in the series. And one of the many reasons for that is because of just how timeless its lighting and coloring is. I'm not sure what black magic Bungie pulled back in 2007, but the game's lighting was weirdly ahead of its time. So much so that even future games in the Halo series like Reach failed to look quite as natural as Halo 3. Taking that in mind, Reshade on Halo 3 was going to be quite a challenge. But I had a secret weapon: ray tracing. Notorious Reshade artist Marty Mcfly had been developing a pretty cool simulated ray tracing effect in Reshade, and he made it available to his patrons, which I am one of. So armed and ready, I loaded into the mission The Storm, which has a rainy industrial setting which I thought would complement the ray-traced reflections. I cracked my knuckles and I got to work, opening up the Reshade tool, and first thing I did was inject some anti-aliasing into the game to clean up some of the jaggies. Since I was updated to the new version of Reshade, I wanted to try out one of the new sharpening filters that came with it. According to the description, this was designed to sharpen and enhance texture detail while leaving the overall image clear. Halo 3 is a game with a lot of subtle detail in its textures and environments, and this filter definitely did help things like small grooves or dents in metal surfaces pop out. Setting this effect too high can cause the game to look, well, awful, so I found that sweet spot and then moved on to colors. Like I said, Halo 3 is a beautifully colored game, so there wasn't much I could do to make it look better. So I just settled with amping up the greens, golds, and cyans a little bit. That way, the dark and rainy atmosphere could be preserved, but with a bit more color in the environment. I was happy with it. Now was the moment I was nervous about: simulated ray tracing. I booted it up and took a look at what I could do. I tried to tune it to capture the kind of humid and soggy look that a rain-soaked battlefield would have, and so I adjusted the new shadows applied to the environment to look a little bit washed out and unfocused. I noticed a command called Sky Color, which I curiously turned on and instantly panicked when it washed my screen in an angry red. Okay, that's something I'm gonna have to return to later, just to figure out what it is. I adjusted the materials to kind of give everything a metallic, wet look, and then adjusted the reflections and light bounces to look subtle enough to be appreciated, but not too annoying. After a bit more fiddling, I was finally set. I was pretty happy with how it turned out. It was kinda weird seeing Marines reflected off the wet concrete, or details on Chief's hands actually dynamically shaded. Something that was also cool due to the ray tracing was making sure that colors would behave realistically in certain lighting conditions. So, as an example, if light reflected off of orange surfaces, the lighting would kind of take that orange and scatter it around the environment. This was really obvious on the backpacks that grunts would wear, or this little step over here.
It is unfortunate that our enemies also bear witness to its glory, but their dull eyes will soon be closed, seared by the ring's unforgiving light.
This one, he's gotta kill us all! Eat it, demon!
Chief, open the door. We can roll on through.
Let's go!
Oh, run away! That guy!
Go! Open the door, Chief. We got
I got close to a Covenant hologram projector and just started toggling ray tracing on and off, and just admired the sheer artistry that went into something as complicated as this Reshade filter. I'm sure YouTube doesn't do it justice because it'll slightly compress some of the details, but it looked really impressive to see Halo 3 with such a new level of detail. And really, that should have been the end of it. Unfortunately, it was just the beginning. Something evil woke up inside me. Something that said, you know what? This doesn't look #cinematic enough. My fingers darted over to the depth of field effect, which I turned on. I made sure to have the setting roughly target wherever my crosshair aimed at. That way, whatever I targeted could be the center of attention, with everything else kind of blurred and faded. I stormed down the hallway, the Covenant reeling in terror at this reshaded monstrosity that was coming towards them. I took my fight outside to the rain-soaked, muddy exterior of the base, and made sure the Covenant ate my ray-traced, blurred bullets. This wasn't enough, however. It needed to be more #cinematic. I did the unthinkable and added a cinematic border to the screen. And then, in the midst of all this chaos, I had a worse idea. Drunk on power, I hopped on over to a metal-themed multiplayer map and opened up the tool for screen-spaced reflections. Let's turn it up a bit. Things were starting to look more metallic and reflective, including my gun, which began to take on a worryingly glass-like complexion. Unfortunately, this only fed my ego. More. It needed more. Someone really should have stopped me. Eventually, I got it looking somewhat like that episode of SpongeBob where Squidward went into the future and everything was chrome. And really, this wasn't enough for me. I needed more. I dove into my settings and found Bloom, which I instantly turned on, and now everything looked bright, shiny, and reflective. I increased the intensity of the ray-traced reflections for good measure, and this was the stuff of nightmares. But why just stop at metallic surfaces? Let's see what glassed Halo 3 looks like in a natural environment. Something hilarious I noticed while running around was that Reshade doesn't understand my HUD is not actually part of the game world, so things such as my crosshair or my bullet counts were reflected on the ground. Curiously, I loaded into the final mission of Halo 3 and was greeted by an ice sculpture of Arbiter in a hallway of glass being attacked by glass figures of Flood, and finally this is what broke me. Enough was enough. My conscience finally convinced me to tone things down and maybe do something a little bit more enjoyable.
Were it not for the Arbiter's Council, I would have glassed your entire
video game. I decided to come off my power trip by hopping on over to the Arc and messing around with the depth of field effect, some of the colors, as well as the ray tracing, to kind of make something that, I don't know, might look good in a video in the future, whenever I need it. Just something experimental.
Here, this panel will activate a ray.
I quit out of the mission and decided to do some things that you guys seem relatively fond of. Starting with the ever-popular Borderlands filter, which I applied to a dusty environment, and it worked. I then decided to throw on a curved CRT TV effect to try to bring myself back to the experience of playing Halo 3 before I had HD.
I have 343 Guilty Star. Monitor installation 0.
Yeah, well, you're also our ticket through this wall. So if you don't mind...
I will gladly aid the restoration progress.
Shotgun!
I initially wanted to stream my attempts to use ray tracing, but it kind of ended in disaster, and I tried to stream 4 times. None of the streams worked. There were all sorts of audio issues, and so I just eventually had to call it quits. So I'm gonna look into getting those audio issues sorted, because it's about time. And with that being said, I hope that you guys enjoy the footage. In the future, I am going to be revisiting previous Halo games on PC, using ray tracing on them, just trying to make them look pretty. And I'd love some recommendations for good levels that would look very pretty. So with that being said, I'll leave you guys to it, and I'll see you on the next video.